Have you ever been told, let me check with the team, and then waited and waited and waited for a decision? Most businesses assume that that's collaboration. For clients, however, it signals something very, very different. It signals that no one actually owns the decision. And when decision ownership is unclear, trust begins to leak. And here's the interesting part. Most leaders assume that this is a communication problem. It's not, it's a decision ownership problem. Welcome back to Trust Leaks, the podcast where we uncover the small experience gaps that quietly cost businesses trust, retention, and growth. I'm Sandra Martini, founder of the Trust Leaks framework, the Get It Done Right community, and host of the Trust Leaks podcast. In our last episode, we talked about how consensus culture can quietly weaken culture clarity. There's another trust leak that often sits right behind it, however, and it's even more common when it comes to businesses that are growing. It's what happens when no one actually owns that final decision. When decision rights aren't clearly defined, organizations develop something that I call decision latency. Decision latency is the time between a conversation happening and a decision actually being made. From a client's perspective, that delay sends a signal, and that signal is instability. You see, clients do not see internal meetings, Slack conversations, leadership discussions, alignment conversations, all the things. They only experience the resulting clarity or the resulting delay. As mentioned in our last episode, clients don't experience your internal processes. They do experience the speed and the confidence of your decisions or your business's decisions. When authority is clear, decisions feel predictable. When authority is unclear, however, decisions stall, and that stall quietly creates doubt. Now, reality is, are they sitting around going, I think we have a decision stall here. My trust is weakening. No, of course not. Of course, they're not doing that. However, subconsciously, something is off. They might know what it is. They might notice it's taking long to get back. Things are changing. Or they might not have any idea what it is. They might just be like, something feels off. And then that creates its own kind of trust link issue. See, decision latency appears when organizations operate with implicit authority instead of defined authority. And this means that implicit, everyone assumes who owns the decision. Well, of course it's Joe. Of course. However, it was never explicitly defined. So when that happens, when a decision pops up, people defer upward. They seek consensus. They wait for approval. They hesitate. And instead of a quick, confident decision, we have a decision loop. When decision ownership is unclear, decisions don't fail, they stall. Clients see this as delays, changing timelines, multiple explanations, and different answers depending who they ask. Those are the signals that quietly weaken trust. Again, perhaps consciously, perhaps not. You see, one of the most common signals of decision latency is a phrase that clients hear frequently. Let me check with the team. Now, sometimes that's appropriate. However, when that phrase becomes routine, it signals something deeper. It signals that no one clearly owns the decision. And clients start wondering, who's actually in charge? Why is this taking so long? Is this business actually aligned internally? Do they understand what I want? Do I understand what they're giving me? See, clients don't necessarily expect decisions to be instant, but they do expect them to be owned. Early stage companies, smaller businesses, they don't have this problem as much. The team is smaller because the founder often makes the call. Authority is obvious. But as your company grows, teams expand, departments form, and responsibilities spread. And now, if the decision rights are not internally and intentionally clarified during this growth, then the authority becomes blurred. People start protecting themselves from making the wrong call, or they don't realize that they're the ones that own it, or they think they do and they don't. So instead, they seek alignment, and that alignment creates more delay and more decision latency. Given this, what trust signals are clients actually looking for? You see, they don't need to see your internal structure. They don't need the Slack meetings, the decision meetings, the management meetings. They just need to experience confidence in your decisions. So when you give them a decision, they need to know you stand behind it and you feel good about it. Trust signals that clients do notice: clear answers, consistent messaging, predictable timelines, and visible accountability. World of difference. Those signals come from one structural reality. Trust grows when decision ownership is crystal clear. Not rigid, not authoritarian, just defined and known. Trust leaks rarely come from dramatic mistakes. They come from small structural gaps that quietly signal instability, such as undefined decision rights. If decisions in your organization regularly require multiple conversations before somebody feels comfortable making the call, you may not have a communication problem. You may have a decision ownership problem. This is one of the most common trust leaks that I see inside growing businesses. And one of the reasons I created the trust leaks framework is because those structural gaps are rarely visible from inside your business, from inside your organization. Clients, however, feel them immediately. And once you learn to see them, you start realizing just how many businesses are quietly losing trust without even ever understanding why. Thanks for listening to Trust Leaks. If this episode resonated, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss future conversations about trust, leadership, and sustainable growth.